Burning Point.
Hello and welcome to the show. With me, Ekaterina Kudashkina. Recent Kiev decision creates a new risk of man-made nuclear accident. Speaking at a press conference on the 24th of September, Mikhail Gashev, first deputy head of the State Inspectorate for Nuclear Regulation of Ukraine, said he had signed a number of contracts to supply nuclear fuel made by U.S. Westinghouse company. It is to be used in Soviet-made nuclear power stations, which are not designed for that kind of fuel. Yuzhno-Ukrainsk nuclear power plant in December 2014 will receive a batch of upgraded fuel made by Westinghouse, Mikhailo Gashev told reporters in Kiev. According to Vladimir Kuznetsov, professor at the Northern Arctic Federal University, replacing Russian nuclear fuel with American fuel is an explosive idea of Ukraine's leadership. Europe may face 3 new Chernobyl disasters, the expert said. We are now joined by our guest speaker Anton Khlopkov, the director of the Center for Energy and Security in Moscow, Russia.
Ukraine is not the first country which is trying to use Westinghouse-produced nuclear fuel for Soviet-designed reactors, so-called VVR reactors. There was an experience in a few other countries, in Finland, in Czech Republic, and there was also attempt in Slovakia to supply U.S. company origin fuel. And the performance of that fuel was not good enough, and I should say that even in Czech Republic there was some failures of the fuel, some leaks of the fuel, which means it creates challenges to the nuclear safety of the nuclear power plant. This is why, for example, Czech Republic at the nuclear power plant Temelin decided to stop U.S. fuel 2 years before the contract with Westinghouse has expired. So the problem is in the quality of the fuel, and during the last few years, Westinghouse was supplying partially its fuel for free nuclear power plants in Ukraine. And again, the conclusion from the technical authorities of Ukraine was quite negative, that the behavior of the fuel is not predictable and it can cause some nuclear safety challenges, as well as it was in the case of nuclear fuel at the Temelin nuclear power plant in Czech Republic.
So with all this information in mind, what could be the reason why would Kiev authorities now decide to replace the fuel?
It goes without saying that it's purely political decision, and Ukraine would like to use Westinghouse-produced fuel for political reasons rather than for some other ones. And I should also mention that there is another dimension of that problem, because according to the data which is available, the Westinghouse-produced fuel at least 20% more expensive than the Russian origin fuel, the fuel which is supplied these days by 12 company, which is subsidiary of Rosatom State Nuclear Corporation, which means that if Ukraine actually starts replacing of Russian origin fuel with Westinghouse-produced fuel, it will cost every year at least $100 million extra, because during the last 2 years, Ukraine spent about $600 million to buy Russian origin fuel. I'm not sure that now Ukraine has the economic situation which allow them to pay extra $100 million just for political reasons. So I hope that this decision in Ukraine is not the final one and can be reviewed again, because this is about both. This is about safety and this is about economy of the country.
Our guest speaker is Anton Khlopkov, the director of the Center for Energy and Security in Moscow, Russia.
Burning Point.
If the decision to use U.S. origin fuel will be implemented, it can create additional problems in the economics of the Ukraine, as well as to create challenges to nuclear safety in that country. And people in Ukraine remember well how important safety is, because Chernobyl nuclear power plant, which is shut down right now, actually is located on the territory of Ukraine. This is not so much about American technology. This is about safety. And this is just because the technology of fuel production is very complex, because the same true with regard supplying of Russian origin fuel to U.S. design reactors. It's also still not the issue that Russian companies can supply U.S. origin or Western origin reactors with its own fuel, because it takes a lot of time to produce reliable fuel if you are not the origin of that technology. So from that point of view, those experts who are against using U.S. fuel, U.S. origin fuel in Ukraine, they're not so much against Americans, they're against using the fuel which is not safe enough, which is not good enough at the reactors, because they believe it can damage not only the nuclear industry of Ukraine, but we should be clear on that if there is a new accident at the nuclear power plants after 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl and Fukushima, it can kill the whole nuclear industry. And many countries, including actually Russian Federation, invested a lot to that technology and dependent a lot on nuclear power plants in electricity production. Again, it goes without saying that the previous experience with that fuel demonstrated that it creates some safety challenges. Again, there are a number of examples what nuclear safety can mean and what outcome of that can be. But again, I would not say that it goes clearly that if there is American fuel there would be a new Fukushima. But the whole principle of operation of nuclear power plant, which is safety is the first priority, is undermined by this Ukrainian choice, again, if it will be implemented, because it's not only about political decision to change one fuel with another, but this is also an important financial decision, because Ukraine will have to pay more, because Westinghouse company does not produce as much fuel as Russia produces for similar reactors, which means that if you produce more fuel of the same type, it will be cheaper than if you produce just assemblies for a limited number of reactors. And again, from that point of view, this political decision in Ukraine, which looks like Ukraine would like to implement, can cost a lot, not only to nuclear industry of Ukraine, but to the budget of the country, which face huge problems these days as well.
Well, Dr. Khlopkov, anyway, but if Ukraine chooses to afford the cost, the financial cost, we definitely cannot afford the risk. So I hope that the point you are making is going to be heard. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your great interview.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for good questions.
And just to remind you, our guest speaker was Anton Khlopkov, the director of the Center for Energy and Security in Moscow, Russia. This is Burning Point. We're focused on Kiev, creating new risk of man-made nuclear accident in Europe. So the move creates new risk to nuclear security not only in Ukraine or Russia, but also for much of Western Europe. Are people in Europe aware of the growing threat? This is something we're discussing with our next guest speaker, Christoph Horstel, government consultant and political analyst based in Germany.
they see three risks involved. And as I just see, they also had a Russian expert, Mr. Kuznetsov, in March this year in the German parliament in an official hearing about the subject of security in Ukrainian nuclear power plants. So what we have in this triple risk is first that they are very old, all of them 20 to 30 years old. The second is there's a risk that, the war taking place in Ukraine might spill over into a region where such a power plant is situated. And the third is that very well it was recognized, though not very widely and also not very urgently, that the nuclear material of the U.S. company named Westinghouse was used. It was found out it's not compatible and that these sticks, in fact, were bending under the pressure, and that immediately Ukraine turned to Russia and asked them, please send us the old fuel material because the new one doesn't work. And now they sign a contract. This is, of course, alarming, but I think it will take some time until this trickles through to Western countries. And, of course, we have powerful industry interest now from the American side and also from the European side that this doesn't get too much notoriety.
But, Mr. Horstel, when we are talking about this kind of risk, it is absolutely international. It goes across the borders, and we had a tragedy like Chernobyl, and memories are still fresh of it. So do you think that the international community could do something to prevent this kind of development?
It will do so only if the Russians, I think, send a formal request to them to very carefully reconsider what is being done right now, and not let, day-to-day policies interfere into massive security issues. So, because this is happening here. I will just remind you of what happened to the method of winning gas, fracking. We had, in the past years, in 2011, widespread unrest in the media on the occasion of this idea being vented that Germany might be included in the fracking areas. And now this was 2011. And now in the present situation, with the relations to Russia deteriorating quickly on behalf of Washington, we now have broadcasts, very interesting, from the same type of public television in Germany, who say, well, fracking is just not so bad. So we have a change of policies here, disregarding security issues, poisoning issues, and things like that. So health issues, in fact, due to political issues, that is already a precedent, a very bad one. But of course, the nuclear issue tops it all.
Mr. Horstel, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And just to remind you, this time our guest speaker was Christoph Horstel, government consultant and political activist based in Germany. Well, and with this we end this edition of Burning Point, brought to you by me, Ekaterina Kudashkina. Thank you so much for staying with us. Goodbye, and take care.